Hello, good night, everyone, and welcome to the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. Tonight's panel discussion is on the ILO-ILC 2025, presented by the Labor Studies Department of the CCLCS. Tonight, we have three panelists with us. We have Rosamay Whittier, who is the Head of International Affairs Unit at the Ministry of Labor, Small and Micro Enterprise Development, who is with us in studio. And online, we have two other esteemed panelists. We have Vera Guseva, who is the Workers' Activity Specialist at the International Labour Organization Office for the Caribbean, and Comrade Christopher Steele, President General of NUGFW and NATOC representative. So what we're going to do today is have each panelist present for about 10 minutes, reviewing the ILC 2025, and then we will have questions from the audience for each of the panelists. As we said, the subject matter tonight are the key agenda issues that arose out of the ILC 2025 and the implications for the workplace in Trinidad and Tobago. Coming out of the ILC 2025, which was actually the 113th session in Geneva between June 2nd and the 13th, you had three principal issues being raised. The first one was the protection against biological hazards, where you have Convention 192 and Recommendation 209, which provide a legal framework for member states to formulate national policies aimed at protecting workers and preventing biological risks at the workplace. You also had an emphasis on decent work in the platform economy. And this matter was considered because of the increase in work through digital platforms with an absence of international labor standards to ensure labor rights for this type of work. And we've all seen a growth of participation in the platform economy all over the world. Many people in Trinidad and Tobago aren't even aware that they are working on the platform economy. And then finally, the third one is the transitioning to the formal economy. Informal work remains a significant feature for many countries and their labor markets in the global south. The conference adopted conclusions which reaffirmed the ILO's commitment to formalization as a rights-based process and the promotion of recommendation number 204 of 2015 on transitioning to formality. So, as I said before, what we will do is invite each of the panelists to make a presentation of about 10 minutes, and then after each panelist has presented, we will have a question and answer forum. The first panelist that I'd like to invite is one of our panelists online, Vera Guseva, for her presentation. And I've seemed to have lost her, her bio. Yeah. Oh, there it is on the back page. Thank you very much. Yeah, so Vera Guseva is the Workers' Activity Specialist at the ILO Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean, based in Port-of-Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. With 2 decades of experience in the labor movement, she has worked on a broad range of issues with a strong focus on advancing decent work, social justice, and the effective application of international labor standards. Vera began her career with the ILO in 2013 at its Geneva headquarters, working in the Bureau for Workers' Activities, ACTRAV. Prior to that, she worked with the Federation of Independent Trade Unions of Russia. She holds degrees in law and in pedagogy and foreign language education, and brings a deep commitment to worker empowerment and social dialogue in her work. So, ladies and gentlemen, we give the floor over to Vera, who is a really good friend of both the labor movement in the Caribbean and Cipriani College. Vera.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this nice presentation, and good evening to everyone joining us. It's a pleasure to join you today to reflect on the outcomes of the 2025 International Labour Conference. And I would like to use my initial 10 minutes to do, I would say, two things. Maybe before I go into the International Labour Conference 2025, I will say a few words about the International Labour Organization that I represent, as well as the International Labour Conference and standard setting in general, as the two topics we are going to discuss today were the standard setting that took place during the conference earlier this year on biological hazards and platform work, as well as indeed the general discussion on the transition to the formal economy. So what is ILO? International Labour Organization that I represent is an agency of the United Nations devoted to promoting social justice and internationally recognized labor rights. It was founded in 1919 on the idea that lasting peace is only possible if it is built on social justice. The ILO is unique in the UN system because of its tripartite nature. Every one of our 187 member states is representing in the organization, including all the decision-making bodies, not only by the government, but also by employers and workers' organizations. All three groups negotiate together, set priorities, set and supervise the application of international labor standards. And the International Labour Conference that meets every year at the organization's headquarters in Geneva is the highest decision-making body of the organization and is often referred to as the Parliament of Labor. They are government, employer, and worker delegates from all member states, debate major issues affecting the world of work, and decide on the ILO's program and budget, as well as indeed adopt international labor standards that are legal instruments that ILO constituents, governments, employers, and workers create, and that set the basic principles and rights at work. So international labor standards uh, take the form of either conventions and protocols, which are legally binding international treaties that may be ratified by member states, or they are recommendations, which serve as non-binding guidelines. And standard setting, we always say that standard setting is at the heart of the International Labour Organization, because these standards that are set in this tripartite manner, they express agreed minimum protections for workers everywhere. For example, they cover a wide range of topics indeed over the years, like freedom of association, non-discrimination, abolition of child and forced labor, or healthy and safe working environment. Secondly, they create a level playing field so that businesses compete on productivity and innovation and not on who can undercut wages or safety the most. And they also give governments, employers, and unions a common language and reference points for laws, policies, and collective agreements. Standards are negotiated in detail at the conference by tripartite committees, and they often follow a double discussion procedure when a topic is discussed in one year, revised, and then brought back the following year for the finalization and adoption. Over the course of its history, the ILO has adopted 407 standards, of them 192 conventions, 6 protocols, and 209 recommendations. So this year, if we move to this year, the 113th session of the International Labour Conference focused on 3 big issues that are directly reflected in tonight's theme, and 2 of them were standard setting, and these were protection against biological hazards, as well as decent work in the platform economy. And the third topic that we are discussing today is the outcomes of the general discussion on the transitioning from the informal to the formal economy. So let's move to biological hazards. And the conference adopted the Biological Hazards in the Working Environment Convention, number 192, and its accompanying recommendation 209. These are the first ever international labor standards dedicated specifically to biological risks at work. These standards respond directly to lessons that were learned from the COVID-19 pandemic as well as other outbreaks. And they require countries to develop national policy and strategy on preventing and controlling biological hazards at work, identify and assess risks in workplaces from hospitals and labs to agriculture, waste management, hospitality, and even education. Apply the hierarchy of controls, starting with eliminating or reducing exposure, then engineering and organizational measures, and only then the personal protective equipment. Ensure workers' participation, information, training, and the right to remove themselves from dangerous situations, and strengthen preparedness and resilience so that health emergencies do not turn into workplace disasters. So this was the first item on the standard setting, and the conference following the second discussion. The first discussion took place in 2024, adopted these two revolutionary instruments. The second big standard setting and a big topic was decent work in the platform economy, the work that is organized through digital platforms such as food delivery, online freelancing, care and cleaning apps, as well as many others. And so this year, the International Labour Conference held its first discussion in a double discussion process to develop international labour standards on the issue. After intense debate, the conference decided in favor of preparing a convention supplemented by a recommendation. The discussions and the draft texts agreed so far focus on several key areas. Uh, it, is, uh, it focuses on the coverage and provides the definitions of digital labor platforms as well as platform workers to make sure that that all the workers are covered. It ensures fundamental rights and protection, making sure that workers enjoy core labor rights such as freedom of association, non-discrimination, protection against child and forced labor, and safe and healthy working conditions. It also deals with making sure that the widespread problem of workers who are effectively employees but are classified as independent contractors and therefore miss out on labor law and social security protection is addressed. It also sets the fair pay and working time, social protection, ensuring that platform workers can access social security on terms comparable to all the other workers. It also speaks about algorithmic management and data protection and access to justice. And the draft text proposed by the office is available at the website of the International Labour Conference. And so the third area of focus at the 113th session of the International Labour Conference was a general discussion on innovative approaches to addressing informality and promoting the transition to formality for decent work. Globally, around 6 out of 10 workers and 8 out of 10 enterprises operate in the informal economy without adequate legal protection or social security. Back in 2015, the conference adopted Recommendation 204 on the transition from the informal to the formal economy. That was the first international standard, and that is the first international standard to focus specifically on this issue. It sets out objectives such as facilitating the transition while respecting workers' rights, promoting the creation and preservation of decent work in the formal economy, because indeed to make sure that there is no backward transition, and preventing the informalization of formal jobs. This year's discussion reaffirmed the importance of Recommendation 204 and led to a resolution calling on countries to develop right-based strategies for formalization with strong emphasis on freedom of association, collective bargaining, social protection, and targeted support for the most vulnerable workers and economic units. The informal economy includes street and market vendors, own account workers, many domestic workers, some construction and agricultural workers, and small family businesses. Informality often means low and unstable income, lack of social security and safe working conditions, and no voice at work at all. But it also represents uh, resilience for these workers. So it is important to understand, and the discussion was focusing a lot on it, that transitioning to formality is not about punishing informality. It is about extending rights, extending protection, and providing better opportunities for decent work to the workers while improving productivity and ensuring fair competition between enterprises that pay taxes and comply with labor law and those that do not. So this was a very brief overview of the three topics that were on the agenda of the International Labour Conference earlier this year, and I indeed look forward to hearing the perspectives of my fellow panelists and to our discussions on what this means specifically for the world of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vera. We want to go next to Comrade Christopher Street, who attended the ILC this year as the representative of NATOC. So let me introduce Comrade Street to you. Comrade Christopher Street is the President General of the National Union of Government and Federated Workers, NUGFW. He has been at NUGFW for over 40 years and served as first Deputy President General for 16 years. With the Housing Workers section, he held various leadership roles, including branch officer, financial secretary, assistant secretary, secretary and president, and in carrying out his duties and responsibilities in these roles, he established his commitment to effective representation and astute leadership. Comrade Street diligently serves the working class on various boards and committees. He serves as treasurer on the National Trade Union Center and was appointed as a member on the Registration, Recognition, and Certification Board. He is also an active member of the Pension Plan Committee for the implementation of the daily rated pension plan, and he is an active member of the Management Committee of the Medical Plan for daily rated workers. Comrade Christopher Street also serves as a former board member of the Chaguanas Development Authority and a former member of the Social Dialogue Task Force. Comrade Street is committed to continuous personal and professional growth and membership engagement. He places an emphasis on strengthening advocacy and to influence labor policies and regulation and the promotion of fair labor practices. So we invite Comrade Street to give us his experience of the conference and its implications for the workplace in Trinidad and Tobago. Comrade. You're muted, Comrade. Comrade, your mic is muted.
All right, are you hearing me now?
We're hearing you now, thank you.
Right. So I'm saying thank you, comrade, for that warm introduction. And I also want to say thank you to my fellow panelists this afternoon. I'm so happy that you would have allowed my sister from the ILO to go first, because I think after she would have finished, we could have all packed up and say, okay, thank you. That is the end of the, the webinar. She was so insightful and in terms of her presentation. If you have never been to the ILO, I know you have, and what the ILO is about, I know based on her contribution. Once you paid attention, you would have been enlightened as to what the International Labour Organization is about. So I'm happy to take this opportunity to give my perspective as a first time, I don't want participant to the ILC, and my impressions. Firstly, let me say I was really impressed by not the volume of persons in attendance, but the kind of cooperation and cooperative spirit that exists at the conference. It was indeed a pleasure to experience business, government, and labor working together seemingly genuinely and not just appearing because you are asked to attend. You could have seen serious efforts by all parties to really examine what each other would have put forward and sincerely, that is the impression I got, sincerely attempting to understand each other's position so that at the end of the day, a convention or a recommendation could have been had that really and truly reflected the views of the various entities, the various sectors. You know, that to me was revealing, and it was in a good way something that I really and truly embraced and was happy that such a forum existed. Was my first, you know, they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Well, I was truly impressed by the way in which the ILC was organized and the participants therein. So, having said that, I, as labor representative, worker representative from Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean, without, as the ILO's constitution provide, without a advisor. Now you could imagine, well, if I had to make a recommendation to the government, always send an advisor who maybe have been someone who would have participated before. And while I did it on the last occasion, comrades, I really have to thank Sister Rosa May, who had her own duties. She would have been sent to do specific things, but nevertheless, she took the time to assist where necessary, assist me, the worker representative, where necessary, so that at least I could have participated in some measure. Comrades, I would have stated that the conference would have had over 5,000 members. I can be corrected. Representative from all 197 countries, as it said, from over the world. Now, Trinidad and Tobago being a dot, um, apparently the Constitution gives us one delegate and one advisor. There are the larger countries, however, who labor or worker representative will be 40 persons at some time. You know, so between 1 and 40 and some different figures in between there. We are slightly disadvantaged because there are a number of forums that are taking place throughout the course of the day, of which one person cannot treat with all. So a matter, your labor might start at 8 o'clock to 3, then we may have another matter where labor need to be represented that starting 10 and finishes 2. So while the larger contingents would have had the opportunity to split up their delegates and advise them on which area or which one of the programs they should attend, Trinidad and Tobago and indeed other small states didn't have that opportunity. At the CCL today, actually, that was a major concern of the outgoing president. And what was proposed, and I think it is an excellent proposal, that we in the Caribbean, while we are individual states, we are one region, and maybe we should collaborate in terms of where and who, which delegate will be going where. So instead of all of us in one forum, we can divide ourselves, and that will be predetermined before we go to the ICL. But we need to arrange ourselves in a way as a region by virtue of our size in terms of the number of delegates that we are allocated. Labor should come together before and determine which island or which country will attend whichever session. And at the end of the day, we can meet and collaborate, share the information that we would have received in each session, and therefore it will serve us better as a region, because I know they have the same challenges that Trinidad and Tobago would have had based on our limited participation, based on our limited number of delegates. So when you have countries like India and Russia and Canada and the USA who have multiple labor representatives, and they will have multiple business and government also, they are at an advantage in that they can share their delegates and allocate their delegates in a manner that at the end of the session, they would have been involved and have information on every single item that workers should be participating in. So I just want to throw that out. Maybe the powers that be who can organize and influence that kind of approach, we need to do that to bring maximum benefit to the region as a whole and to the individual states, in particular. Um, so to me personally, it was very exciting, very eye-opening for different reasons. I was happy to have gone and got that experience. But as I said, um, we need to, as a region, um, review how we approach the ILO. It is critical that we have a voice. I know one of the regions, Barbados in particular, where you would have had one representative. This is the 10th year or the 14th year, right? Many countries will have delegates return, um, so that they can follow up and, participate and gain the experience and knowledge that the ILO really and truly offers. One of the, if I may be permitted, one of the matters that I would want to ask the chair and the other members of the panel is the report of the Director General, right? And if I am permitted to, I just want to read the executive summary of the Director Generals so that we can have an appreciation. The theme of his report was the state of social justice, right? And we must understand that the nature of the ILO and its goal is the achievement of social justice. So while we have these other entities, government and business and so on, the focus to me from where I sat is to ensure, improve, provide social justice for all. And that will include workers, with more emphasis on workers, because of the three entities, the most vulnerable are the workers and labor and the underprivileged, who most of the time is represented by labor. So that is the goal of that organization. So let me permit me to read what he would have said in his executive summary. You too can access it, I'm sure. But as we are here, he says social justice is the cornerstone of peaceful, inclusive, and sustainable societies. It is at the heart of the ILO's mandate and part of the essential interdependence recognized in the Charter of the United Nations. And there has been meaningful, measurable progress in the 30 years since the landmark 1995 Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development. Poverty and child labor have fallen. Poverty and child labor have fallen, and school completion rates have risen by double digits. For the first time in the recorded history since 2023, over 50% of the world has been covered by some social protection scheme. For millions around the world, however, the promise of fair treatment, decent work, and equal opportunity remains elusive. Persistent inequalities, poverty, and instability still confront us, calling urgently for renewed vision and collaboration. The Second World War, the Second World Summit for Social Development, to be held in Doha, Qatar in November 2025, offers a pivotal platform for revitalized global commitment to social justice amid growing challenges posed by climate change, technologies, etc., etc. So the chairman, the Secretary General would have captured the current issues, the current challenges that are posed by the international scene at this time. And it is my hope that we would have treated with the global approach to, as my sister would have pointed out, the platform economy, biological hazards. There was some touching on the decent work agenda. Some mention was made of that, and these are issues that currently prevail and currently need the attention of an institution like the International Labour Organization and the its conference, its annual conference, the ILLC, that will continue to get together to promote social justice. Yes? So I would like to stop here at this point in time.
For your focus on the perspective of workers in the conference, especially workers from small societies like those of the Caribbean, and the importance of adopting a kind of regional approach to this global parliament. We want to go now to Ms. Rosa May Whittier, who, as the comrade pointed out, was at the conference in a different perspective related to her role in government. So, by introduction, Rosa May Whittier is the head International Affairs Unit, Ministry of Labor, Small and Micro Enterprise Development. Rosa May has an academic background in economics at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. She has a BSc in economics and an MSc in developmental studies. She has worked in the area of policy and research on labor and employment issues for over 10 years. Throughout her career, she has held roles at the Ministry of Finance, the Oilfields Workers Trade Union, as well as the CARICOM Secretariat. She currently serves as the head of International Affairs Unit of the Ministry of Labor. Rosa May.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to the college for organizing this webinar. I always like to reflect on some words of the conference's president last year, who was the Labour Minister of Moldova, who said that Geneva is not Las Vegas. So what happens in Geneva should not stay in Geneva. We really need to be fueling discussions on these agenda items, on these topics. So I'm very happy for this opportunity to bring what happened in Geneva out of Geneva. Thank you also to my fellow panelists for sharing their views. Maybe I am in a tricky position because I now have to speak about the same thing and try to find new things to say. Or maybe it's an opportunity and not a challenge and I can stand on their shoulders. So let's see. So first of all, the topics that we have identified: biological hazards, platform economy, and also formalization. These are what are referred to as technical agenda items. So for the ILC, for each year, there are two types of agenda items. There are some standing items, so those are considered every single year, and they are the Director General's report, as Comrade Street mentioned. So each year, the Director General, the head of the ILO, will present a report to the conference, and all constituents, all governments, workers, and employers have an opportunity to take the floor in the conference, to address the conference with respect to the Director General's report. The second standing agenda item is finance matters. So this is really the highest decision-making organ of the ILO, and certain financial things such as the contributions that each member state has to make to the organization, also the annual financial statements, and every 2 years the program and budget are considered under this agenda item. And thirdly, it's the application of standards. And Vera mentioned standards. I think if it's one thing most of us know about the ILO, we're familiar with the instruments. Convention number 144, number 190, and we can go down, right? So the collective word for this is standards, and every year there's a specific agenda item where the conference analyzes countries' implementation of these standards. So that's agenda item 3. So I thought it would be useful to just indicate that while there was a focus this year on these 3 technical issues, biological hazards, platform economy, and formalization, there are also these standing agenda items. So in terms of the technical items, of course, as was mentioned before, it was very important for us to consider the issue of biological hazards in the workplace, particularly coming on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic, which really illustrated probably too clearly that, workplaces could become the center of transmission, and for that reason, it is important to have international labor instruments on this issue. And also, as Vera indicated, this is the first international standard on this issue of biological hazards, but it also obviously is connected to the broader issue of occupational safety and health. So that dovetails quite nicely with a development in 2022, which was the adoption of access to a safe and healthy environment as an additional fundamental right in the workplace. The ILO had 4 before, and there's now this 5th one of access to safe and healthy working environment. So these new instruments, 1 convention and 1 recommendation, dovetails quite nicely with OSH also now being a fundamental principle and right at work. And we refer to that, so therefore the discussions at the conference were geared to developing and adopting this new recommendation and convention. So when agenda items for which new instruments are being developed are referred to as standard setting items. And uniquely, this year, we had two standard setting items. So one was biological hazards with the second discussion, because I think the ILO recognizes that it's not an easy or small task to develop a new instrument. So one edition of the conference is not enough. So as Vera was referencing, a double discussion procedure. So when a new instrument is being developed, it goes to the conference twice. So this year was the second standard setting discussion for biological hazards, but it was the first standard setting discussion on the platform economy. So the second one will take place next year. Vera said tense, and I think that's probably a soft word, but there were very, very dynamic discussions on this issue of the platform economy, sometimes, you know, getting stagnated and stuck on certain points. Comrade Street, you remember that? Sometimes 2 days on one point, no exaggeration. But this is what tripartite negotiations are. Also to say that, as has been referenced before, you know, and as we all see, the world of work is dynamic and evolving. The world of work I entered maybe 15 years ago, where we were still sending faxes and those kinds of things, is not the world of work of today. And international instruments need to reflect the contemporary world of work. And therefore, this particular agenda item was extremely important. As our moderator was indicating, you know, many people find themselves employed on digital platforms. We know them. We probably use them. Uber, you know, here with TT Rideshare, what are the food delivery apps, those kinds of things, Food Drop. Down in South, we have Neighborhood Munchies. But they are digital platforms, and the drivers and the riders who are bringing our food for us, or who are coming to provide us with transportation, they are providing labor via this digital platform. This is obviously and very clearly a new form of work, and many of us, our existing labor frameworks will not necessarily fully cover this new type of work. So that is why this agenda item to develop new international labor standards to govern the platform economy is extremely crucial. And then also just to add that I did hear about some World Bank data that says that Trinidad and Tobago has the highest number of platform workers per capita in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. So not definitively, but per capita, you know. That's definitely something to chew on, some food for thought. And in terms of formalization, certainly we can think of many people who don't function in a registered business, you know, vendors on the side of the road, at the traffic lights, those things. These will be persons who are functioning in the informal economy. And what we find is that there are often decent work deficits within the informal economy. What does that mean? That perhaps persons working in the informal economy do not have full access to labor rights and also social protection, those things. So this is why transitioning away from the informal economy to the formal economy is important, because then we can protect those persons' rights more effectively. Also, it has been found that this transition can also promote increased productivity. Productivity can increase if we're functioning in the formal economy as opposed to in the informal economy. So this is just to speak to the importance of that, having considered that agenda item. And Vera indicated that in 2015, the ILO had adopted, so there was a standard setting discussion on formalization, and that led to the adoption of a recommendation on the transition into the formal economy. So actually this discussion this year on informality and formality was actually held on the 10th anniversary of having adopted that recommendation back in 2015. So, moderator, I'll go back to you. Hopefully, I respected my 10 minutes, and we can continue dialoguing on these things.
Thank you very much, Rosa. All right, so what we've had so far is a very good summary of the key areas and context setting done by Vera. We've had a really interesting look at the worker perspective from Comrade Street, and I especially enjoyed the way he focused on the idea of social justice in the conference. And we had from a kind of technical perspective, we had a really deep discussion, as you would expect, from from somebody from the Ministry of Labor, talking about the nature of the tripartite discussion, the nature of standard setting, and I really enjoyed the way Rosamay touched down in Trinidad in some of these very specific discussions. So what we'd like to do now is to press ahead on the idea of the implications of the discussions for the workplace in Trinidad and Tobago, with some questions from the audience. We already have some questions coming in, and I'd like to address the first question to Vera, who started us off. And so, Vera, what we'd like to know is, what the question is, can you share from the ILO perspective what the significance of ILO conventions and recommendations are? What does the ILO expect after these conventions and recommendations are adopted at the International Labour Conference? So what do you expect to come out of the conference from the perspective of the participants?
Thank you very much. So in my introduction, I briefly mentioned what are conventions and what are recommendations, because I think this is also important for understanding of what are the expectations and what happens once the International Labour Conference is over. So just as a reminder that conventions are international treaties. When a country ratifies a convention, it commits itself in international law to respect and implement the provisions of the convention. For example, what I said and what we all, I think, discussed about the biological hazards and the level of protection, this will be expected from a country. And recommendations, while they're not legally binding, they provide very important guidance and options and good practices that help countries translate those principles into policies, into laws, into collective agreements, and even into workplace measures. And same happens to conventions when they're not ratified. So I really liked the quote by Rosamay from the delegate from Moldova, who was saying that what happens in Geneva shall not stay in Geneva. And indeed, so these documents, they're not just abstract, some sort of abstract Geneva policies. They are reference points for labor law, for policies, and for social dialogue in each country. And so what does ILO expect from the ILO perspective once a standard, be it a convention, a recommendation, or a protocol is adopted at the International Labour Conference, like it happened with the Biological Hazards Convention and recommendation? First of all, we expect that these instruments are submitted to the competent authority. And what this means is that so our constituents, our focal points in the governments are traditionally in the ministries of labor, so that there is that once the delegation of the tripartite delegation, indeed led by the Minister of Labor or representatives from the Ministry of Labor, gets back to the country, it informs the parliament of what happened at the conference, including there is the formal procedure of submitting in case there is a convention or recommendation. But again, it is the information. So this is, but there is the obligation, however, to inform the Parliament on this submission. And what happens next? Indeed, for conventions, the ILO encourages member states to ratify and to bring to bring the national laws, policies, and institutions in line with this new standard. That should happen indeed through the process of tripartite social dialogue at the national level that shall bring governments, employers, and workers together to review the existing legislation and to see what changes and how they are to take place. So without ratification, these can be used as a policy benchmark, because again, this is something that has been debated by 187 member states that all have very different levels of economic development, very different traditions, cultures, different state of labor markets. So meaning that these standards, and since everybody was able to agree on it, governments, workers, and employers, these are the real basics. These are the very minimum standards that everybody again has already agreed to. This is another way of what, again, this is not necessarily what ILO expects, but how these standards can practically be used. Then, indeed, the governments, employers, and workers are expected to take ownership of the standards that they negotiated in Geneva, to raise awareness about them, to, like, for example, trade unions can train their members, use these instruments in courts, in collective bargaining, and advocacy, in some workplace policies. And last, maybe but not least, is that ILO has a unique system of supervision. And once a convention is ratified, the governments regularly report to the ILO on how they're applying these conventions, and employers and workers organizations can send their comments, and independent expert body, the Committee of Experts on the Application of Conventions and Recommendations, will review the progress and make some observations and recommendations. So this follow-up that comes with ratification of a convention, it is not a name and shame process, but this is rather to support the continuous improvement. And this is also where the ILO, through the International Labour Office, offers technical assistance, training, and advice to member states. So in short, the adoption of a convention or a recommendation in Geneva is not the end of the journey. It's just the starting point for national action to make those rights and protections a reality at the national level. And I think that I will stop here. Over to you. Thank you.
Very much, Vera. And that takes us on to our next question, which is directed at Comrade Street. As Vera pointed out, what you're looking at now is the beginning of national action as the next stage after the convention, that translating the convention into policy, law, and workplace practice. And so, Comrade, the question from the audience for you is, in your view, is there sufficient buy-in at the tripartite level in Trinidad and Tobago, the tripartite environment, by employer and worker representatives in particular, to begin a constructive discussion in this regard, particularly in relation to these three important issues that we have identified?
Yes. Yes, thank you for the question. Now, we live here and we know and understand our own culture. And one thing I am certain is that any conversation that will redound to more meaningful social justice for workers and the poor and the underprivileged, labor is always ready and willing to participate and give its views. From my observation, I would have been part of a a tripartite committee somewhere in 2010, 2011. They would have had several attempts because I am certain that the other partners, the other partners, I don't know if they are really committed. I'm not so certain. I cannot say for certain that they are committed to the process. I can say with all measure of certainty that labor is. And so to me, sometimes they participate because it will improve their image, or they are invited to, and therefore, they will participate. But whether there is real commitment by the other two parties to social dialogue, from where I sit, I cannot say that I am certainly convinced that they're into the thing. Social dialogue, even in the Caribbean, we would have seen, and for one thing, not to call countries' names, we have seen the approach, even in the Caribbean here, where it would have redounded to success. Apparently, let me talk about business. Business, whether they're willing to make sacrifices. What I would have observed, if a business makes $200 million in profit one year, and they make $190 million in profit the following year, as far as they are concerned, they would have failed. That would not have been a successful year. So the bottom line seemed to be, profits and money and so on. And they're not understanding that there is need. Social justice promotes social stability. And social stability by itself promotes the welfare for all of us. Social welfare in terms of stability of a country. They don't seem to appreciate that, maybe until the fallout of social inequality really rears its head and explodes into something that will bring instability in the society. So, to answer your question, my brother, I want to be brutally frank. While I really and truly welcome the social dialogue, my views in terms of whether the other partners are really and truly into it, and that is left to be seen. They say the proof of the pudding is in the eating, but it is my hope that the other sectors really and truly come on board, partner with us, because the goal is social stability. Social justice promotes social stability, and each and every one of us will benefit. All sectors will benefit once we have that environment of social stability. I don't know if that would answer your question.
Comrade, it begins the answer, definitely. So if we could press the eating a little bit of this pudding, you're saying that labor is committed. So how do how does labor, this committed labor, encourage the other partners to come over into the discussion, especially on these three issues that hark back to the COVID scenario that we just went through, the pandemic, that harks forward to platform economy that is going to affect, as Rosa May pointed out, so many workers. How do we encourage the partners to come into this discussion with us?
By constantly mentioning it and constantly and persistently informing and talking about the benefits that will be derived from a tripartite arrangement, right? That's all we could do, talk and encourage them. We can't make them want to. As I said, one of the one of the um, one of the things that they may have to on their own. You see, you could force, you could, as we know, you could lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. Genuine social dialogue has to come from within them. It must come from within them. They need to want to see it happen and want it to happen so that it can benefit all. We know that in business, in the business circle, if you have no profit in it, then really and truly we're not interested. That attitude must change. How does labor go about changing that attitude? Government, on the other hand, we know government um, always want to ensure that there is some political currency in whatever they do. There must be some political gain. Not understanding my first point that social justice, social stability benefits each and every one of us. And until that they reach that place, comrade, where they understand that and genuinely come on board to achieve social justice and social stability. So you know when they will get serious, when they realize that the country is going in a particular way, and it may be important and prudent for them to get involved. We labor will continue because we understand the importance of it, attempting to encourage them to come on board so that we can talk. We can talk, discuss, and eventually agree on matters that will promote social justice within the society. So we just have to keep on talking. Yes?
But we'll keep on talking. Thanks, comrade. And
Yes.
continuation of that conversation, the next question is for Rosa May here with us in the studio. And again, we're going to look at the eating of this pudding, of this elephant pudding, from the perspective of the state. And the question asks, if you could walk us through the next steps, what exactly is the process that the Ministry of Labor and Small and Micro Enterprise Development will engage in as the outcome of this ILC?
All right, thank you so much for that question. And again, this ensuring that next steps happen following the conference is also part of ensuring that what happens in Geneva doesn't stay in Geneva, right? Sometimes I think about it as socializing or democratizing the outcomes of the conference. So I will start maybe like on a bigger picture, so maybe like on a macro, and then maybe drill down, right? So on for a broader picture in terms of next steps, the first thing is to ensure that the stakeholders are aware of the discussions and the outcomes. So part of what we do at the ministry to contribute to that is that we usually have like a tripartite session for worker and employer organizations where we discuss the key outcomes. Also, some of these agenda items, and of course they're different topics for different years, right? But sometimes they are connected to the work of other ministries or government agencies outside of the Ministry of,
The battery
of
dying.
Labor. For example, biological hazards this year, of course there's an OSH component, but the issue of biological hazards in and of itself is primarily a health issue. So what we did is that we transmitted formally the instruments to the Ministry of Health so that they are aware, because they are the biological hazard experts, right? They are aware that these instruments have been adopted by the International Labour Conference. And, in the past, so last year, for example, care economy, which includes domestic workers, which is primarily a female-dominated sector, that was on the agenda last year. So we would have formally transmitted to the then Child and Gender Division of the Office of the Prime Minister. So you work on this issue, the conference considered this issue, we think you should be aware of this, like that. So that's from a big picture kind of thing. A little more detailed, perhaps a little bit more specific. And if we go back to the issues that were discussed this year, as I said, there, two of the agenda items were standard setting, so therefore that requires a specific type of action, and then the other one on formalization was a general discussion. So for the standard setting agenda items, of course, they were at two different stages. One, biological hazards at the stage of adoption, because this was the second standard setting discussion. So as Vera indicated, all ILO member states are required to submit new international labor standards to the Parliament, which is responsible for law. So we will be undertaking to so do. Vera also indicated that there is a supervisory system through which member states are held accountable for implementation. So ILO tracks who has submitted to competent authority, and there's this list that we aspire not to be on, which is called serious cases of failure to report. And I'm happy to indicate we are not on that list, but countries who have consistently not been able to submit new instruments to the competent authority appear there. But we are up to date. The instruments adopted in past years, the recommendation on apprenticeships, those kinds of things, we have consistently submitted to our competent authority. Again, with biological hazards, these have now been adopted, right? So, as we also indicated, ILO will encourage ratification. So, how that would take place for us, we have a tripartite committee. Again, it's connected to an convention number 144, about tripartite consultations regarding instruments. What that says is that any decisions regarding instruments, such as if the country will ratify, should be undertaken through tripartite consultation. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we have set up a committee, a tripartite committee, charged with the responsibility of ILO instruments. So that committee, so it's not a government decision, it's a decision taken through a tripartite process about ratification. So these two, well, there are two instruments. One is a convention, one is a recommendation. We don't ratify recommendations, they're not legally binding. So the convention will be submitted to the committee, and they will deliberate and they will make a determination. They will look at what the instrument calls for, what do we have that brings us in compliance with the instrument. Perhaps there's some provisions we may not be in compliance with. What do we need to do? And then they may make a recommendation. Yes, ratify, or no, fill these gaps, and then we can look at ratification again. So those are some of the next steps. That is because Biological Hazards Convention has been adopted by the conference. Platform economy, we're preparing for a second discussion. So the next step would be for us to prepare ourselves, review the draft, develop positions to be able to prepare ourselves for the negotiations, the second round of negotiations next year. So those are some of the next steps.
Okay. Let me put you on the spot and ask you, with your experience in the area, are you as, well, jaded as Comrade Street about the environment of the tripartite discussions that needs to take us forward into the next steps? How do
Well,
you see the environment?
well, I think maybe my personality is that I always look at glass half full. So I see, for example, the conference as a good what should I say, like a magnet that can pull the social partners together to discuss these issues, and that can be a foundation for broader, stronger social dialogue on other broader issues.
Comrade, it sounds like if we have a partner here willing to come to the table in the way that you were discussing.
I totally in agreement with that because it happens at that international level. Um, Countries are not forced to participate, but they participate, and so that shows that maybe there is some genuine um, desire to really and truly fulfill the notion of social justice. But when it comes to the local level, at this level, they can probably take a page out of what happens at the conference and see how genuine, and I want to use that term, genuine dialogue with a view of reaching a place where social justice can be achieved. Um, where there is a will, I know we would find a way. I am not as I should say, not that I'm not optimistic or that I am pessimistic, but I am treating with what I see, right? As an individual, as a practicing trade unionist, um, I'm not too sure that that willingness, as espoused by the trade union movement, I'm probably looking for too much, but I know once the trade union gets involved with the question of looking after people, we are willing to go the distance. That's all I'm saying. I'm not too certain about the other two sides. I hope they do, but I can't say from based on what I would have seen over the years, that they are at that place.
Thank you, Comrade. Um, we have another question for Vera, and we are asking, based on the key areas of discussion, decent work, the platform economy, and transitioning into the formal economy, what are the immediate implications that you see from your perspective in the ILO for the tripartite partners to take on in these areas?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. If we look at the decent work in the platform economy standard setting, importantly, these standards have not yet been adopted, right? So the second discussion and adoption is scheduled to take place in 2026. And currently at the ILO website, at the website of the International Labour Conference, there is a published report that contains the texts of the draft convention supplemented by a recommendation on decent work in the platform economy, as was discussed in June, as was agreed in June. And indeed, governments were requested uh, to react to it, to send their comments, again, after having had the consultations with the most representative organizations of workers and employers. Uh, if there are any changes, if there are any suggestions they would like to make, and the deadline for this was earlier in November. So again, the next stage, the comments received from all the member states will be reviewed and will be reflected in the fourth and final report on the standard setting item. It will be prepared by the Office for the consideration at the 2026 conference, 114th session of the International Labour Conference in June 2026. And so I would say that it is important to follow the discussion. For those going to the conference, I think it is important to be there, or to see if, to follow it, or to have this experience. But already now, knowing that such standards will be adopted, there are some probably actions that can be taken. Again, uh, the governments in consultations with their social partners can start reviewing, can start looking at the labor legislation and think how ready we are for the platform economy, how ready we are to protect these workers. And I should mention that last week there was a report published by our office based on the research on the platform workers in the Caribbean, covering, if I'm not mistaken, nine Caribbean countries. So if you are interested, you can use any search engine to find it by the platform economy, ILO, and Caribbean. It will be there. So, but again, like, yes, start looking at the current legislation, and but also in particular in the area of social security, and what are the current protections, how are they applicable to all the workers, because again, these are workers. Workers and their organizations can also have a look at who are these workers, where they are, how they can be organized, how their voice can be made heard, and start looking for including these workers in the collective bargaining. So probably these are some of the matters related to the standard setting on the decent work in the platform economy, looking at the transitioning to the and again, and this also is very relevant to the adopted convention on biological hazards, right? So again, look at the convention, look at the legislation, look at the existing protections, make connections in occupational safety and health, and indeed, even without ratifying, see how it can be applied at probably some workplace policies, and if it can become part of the collective bargaining, for example, especially in most especially in workplaces such as hospitals and waste management. So for the general discussion on the transitioning to the formal economy, indeed, there was the final resolution adopted, the conclusions of the discussion that reconfirmed the message of the recommendation 204. mm, and the priority, I think that the agreed priority is to extend the need to extend rights and protections to all workers and economic units. So again, government in consultation with the organizations of workers and employers can develop or update the national formalization strategy that will have clear targets and timelines. Think about, I think that's one of some of the recommendations, includes ways the need to possibly simplify the registration, the taxation, and compliance procedures for micro and small enterprises, because those are the enterprises that in many jurisdictions are in the informal economy, and link formalization to some tangible benefits, such as access to finance, to training, to public procurement, extend social protection floors, So these are some of the ideas. And for workers and trade unions, again, organize workers in the informal economy, the market vendors, the domestic workers, again, they are workers, and they deserve the protections, and the recommendation 204, as well as the conclusions of the International Labour Conference, can be used again as guidance, and because they said that again, they demand the set the demands on minimum wages, on occupational safety and health, and social protection. Again, trade unions can negotiate collective agreements and sectoral agreements that can explicitly include all workers, including informal workers. So across all the themes, I think, that were discussed at the ILC, the immediate priority is, again, to make what happened in Geneva known, and to see how it can be translated into concrete laws or in policies, in collective agreements that will improve the daily life of workers. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Vera. Well, Comrade Street, the next question comes to you again, and coming out of what Vera was just saying. For all of these conventions, recommendations, the global policy agreements, it comes down to people on the ground being affected by it. It comes down to affecting your focus, social justice. So the question that we're getting is, how does worker organizations, the trade unions, and you, as you were mentioning, you're in the Caribbean, the CCL Triennial Conference of Delegates, how do trade unions help to create this wider social awareness of the agenda items so that they can become things that workers are demanding, they can become part of collective bargaining agreements, part of the fabric of the daily lives of workers and social justice? What do workers, trade unions have to do at this point? Have we lost Comrade Street?
You hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you again. Thank
Okay.
you.
Remember in the office, eh?
Yeah.
So several things coming to me at the same time.
As usual.
Right? So what I'm saying is what trade unions have been doing from its inception, advocacy and attempting to bring out social change, while at the same time attempting to win and improve benefits for its members and workers in general. And the trade union can't stop doing that, and will continue to do that because, as they say, it is in our DNA, right? But the resistance that you will get, and as we say, the times changing, there are certain fundamentals, though, where capital and labor will clash at all times. And the involvement and intervention of the government in attempting, as I said, to create a level playing field. And that will depend on who is governing, but we will continue as labor to do what time immemorial we have been doing, promoting the rights and interests of workers, both socially, economically, and indeed politically, to ensure that the lot of workers continue to improve, that we protect what gains that we would have made over the years, and continue to advocate, continue to promote, continue to do whatever is necessary to protect the rights and interests of workers, I would have said, and to advance the cause of our members and workers in general. Now, we will continue to do that by whatever means that is available because different unions have different capacities, and what within their own capacity, they would have to, as I said, take charge or take that charge in promoting the rights and interests of workers, their members in particular, and workers in general. And we continue to do that. Through the collective bargaining process also, where you seek to improve mirroring conventions. Most of the articles that find themselves in collective agreement would have arise out of certain conventions at the ILC level. In different places, they would have been tailored to treat or to meet the specific needs of the particular area. And we have to remember, comrades, that an agreement does not come about until the parties involved, all the parties involved, agree. It's not a question of what we may desire. What you desire, you will try to promote and convince the other side that this is good, not just for your workers, but for all involved. Yes? And we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, comrade. And we're nearing the end. We have one last question, and quite frankly, it looks like the hardest question. And yes, Rosemary, it is for you. And the question reads that it recognizes that there are several ILO conventions that have not been ratified in Trinidad and Tobago. The example of C-190 is raised, violence in the workplace and domestic violence. So the question is ultimately, where does the responsibility lie to bring the relevant legislation to Parliament? And are we in discussion, the government and the other partners, to have these conventions ratified?
I agree. I do think it's the hardest question. But let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. So maybe I'll start where you ended to talk about
Not hearing her. Can't hear Rosa.
sorry. Back in business now?
Yes, yes, yes.
So now I have to try and remember what I just said.
And I read your lips there, so I would know if you're not saying the same thing.
On Thursday evening at 7:30, so you know that's not the cognitive peak. All right, so in terms of the process for ratification, as I was indicating, we consistent with the ILO practice generally, this specific function related to instruments is also to be undertaken in a tripartite manner. And at the national level, we have what we call 144 committee. That's the abridged version. The full long name is, I hope I get it correct, ILO 144 Tripartite Consultative Committee. And they are tasked with looking at these instruments and making recommendations regarding ratification. That's just one of the things that they do. And as the name says, it is tripartite. So we have government, workers, and employers on this committee. So with a view to try to answer the question, responsibility lies with all social partners through that committee to be able to call for ratification. Of course, and there was mentioned a specific instrument, and there are others, and different stakeholder groups may have an interest in a particular instrument being ratified. So, of course, it's advocacy. Yeah, and but the mechanism would be through your representatives on that committee. Just keep on knocking on the door. And I've been saying that committee will recommend ratification. So that is not ratification. That is making a recommendation. So the rest of the journey does lie with our ministry to be able to, one, inform the cabinet that this committee has made this recommendation, and when the cabinet agrees, yes, the country should ratify, and then there's a formal process through our Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, because as Vera has indicated, International Labour Standards Conventions specifically are international treaties, and there's a specific legal process, depositing instruments of ratification and all those fancy things that have to happen. But as I said, I think certainly advocacy, and then once there's that recommendation for ratification, the ministry will do the needful through the formal channels.
So fundamentally, the pursuit of social justice requires social responsibility. We just have to engage. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect summary.
Thank you very much, Rosamie. And well, that pretty much brings us to the end of the activities tonight. I want to thank all of you out there for participating and for sending in your questions. I want to thank all of the members of staff who have been in support tonight. And I want to thank particularly our participants, Comrade Christopher Steele. Street. It is Tuesday afternoon and very late. Thank you. Comrade Christopher Street, Comrade Rosamie Whittier, and Comrade Vera Guseva. Thank you all for being here, for being with us, and for being such good participants and making the discussion very interesting. We look forward here at the Labor Studies Department and at Cipriani College to continue these discussions, because as we have been told, it has to touch down on the ground, the rubber must meet the road, the demand must be made, and then the movement to incorporating these very important ideas into the day-to-day life of the country and of workers. Well, it's only just beginning. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.